Good morning, everyone. I'm just letting everyone kind of get synced into the program. I see a few more people are still joining, but good morning. Thanks for joining us for a program this morning co-hosted by the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society and the Louisa County Historical Society. Today's program is UVA Descendant Outreach Program, Louisa County Connections, and we're very excited to have Dr. Shelly Murphy here with us this morning. My name is Carleen Kowalczyk. I am the Executive Director of the Louisa County Historical Society, and this is part of our Black History Month virtual program series. Very glad that so many of you can be here to join us this morning. I hope everyone is safe and well. I know we're all experiencing some winter weather, even if you're not living locally. So I'll jump right into introducing our speaker, turn it over to her. She will talk for about 15 minutes and then we will open it up for questions. So many of you already know our speaker this morning, but for those of you who don't, Dr. Shelly Murphy is a native of Michigan with Virginia roots. She has a Doctor of Management and Organizational Leadership from the University of Phoenix and has worked for the Piedmont Housing Alliance. She also is president of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society and is involved in many different historical and genealogical societies across the state and country. She is the lead descendant project researcher for the UVA Descendant Outreach Program and Memorial to Enslaved Laborers. In this role, she uses her decades of experience in genealogical research to research family trees of the enslaved and free laborers who built the University of Virginia and conducts outreach to their descendants. And that is what we are all here to learn about today. So Shelly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Happy to see familiar names. So I'm going to share my screen. One of the things I will say is I will take questions after I get through the talk, and because I will not be able to see the chat, and so I'm going to go ahead and get through. So as you can see, the title is Louisa County, Virginia Enslaved Laborers Who Helped Build the University, just as Carleen said. And going to tell you a little bit about the Descendant Outreach Program. All right, is it going to let me use my finger or is it going to let me use the arrow? There we go. First thing I want to do is thank both of the societies. I love sharing sharing the information about this project that UVA hired me to do. And I love sharing the successes, but I also like sharing the challenges, because what that does for me when I'm sharing the challenges that I'm facing doing this type of research is I'm encouraged, and I have genealogy buddies. Some of you are here in the chat room now that we kind of work some of these things out. And so it just allows me to share the methods and things that I use that hopefully others can use as well, and it'll help them advance their research. So for right now, we're going to start off with a slight overview. I'll talk about the memorial, some basics to African American research. I'll share some of the surnames. It's definitely not all of them connected with Louisa County. And then I'm going to walk you through a couple case studies, per se, if you want to call it, of a couple of the descendants that I've found. And then we can recap a little bit, and then we'll take some questions and answers. Q&A time. Okay. So 2007, Board of Visitors, who oversees the universities in the Commonwealth, apologized for slavery. But what happened was there was a student group that just basically said that's not enough, the apology. And there's just a small plaque, which you can see in the pic right there, that honored the enslaved laborers that were at the university. And again, these students wanted to recognize or have some type of memorial. So the president at the time was Teresa Sullivan, and she created, this is back in 2013, created the President's Commission on Slavery and the university. And basically they studied it. They did a lot of community engagement in the Charlottesville and say Albemarle County community where people had input. They had a competition type thing to hire architects, and eventually everything all worked out. There's actually YouTube videos of the tour of the memorial. It is complete so people can see it. And I've put some websites on there so you can take the tour and see some of the articles that are available. All right, this is not going to play well with me. Okay, so what happened when I first started, which was July 2019, I put together a descendant group, and they were more like the descendant leadership group. Their role at that time was to provide input to the Memorial Enslaved Labor Committee as they were planning a public and private event for the unveiling of the memorial. And so what they wanted was the voice from the descendants. And what's happened, I'm happy to say, is they have formed as a nonprofit. They're now together along with other descendants, and they have formed themselves to be a support for me in the research and keeping the word going out. But they're also there to help descendants, to be able to direct them, be able to share, educational resources and things like that. So that's their website down there. You can see down on the bottom of the slide, www.descendants.uva.org. Visit their website. They are still uploading some things and have no idea what we're going to see build from this. I think it's a fabulous idea that they come together and want to stay together and be a resource to the community of any enslaved community, not just at UVA. They want to be a resource that helps others that might be doing this or the individual families. So how I always get started, and those that know me, I always start off with any type of research, when I took on this job with, what do I know? And so I knew the local area, had to learn more about the local area. I moved to Virginia in 2003. I had an understanding of where freedom came from. I had a passion for genealogical research, hearing the stories, working with other people, being a teacher. I love the opportunity to share and to teach and coach people. I'm in an area that is so full of information. It is a wealth of resources, and I'm going to say in this Central Virginia area. And of course, the support of the historical societies, the local genealogy community. There's several groups, and I have them listed there. Central Virginia History Researchers, Central Virginia Genealogical Association. We have a OGS chapter, which is Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society. And that's Burke Brown Step, that's with the BBS. Plus, of course, the university and other historical homes besides just Jefferson and Monroe and also Madison. And again, you've got the groups of the descendants in each of those historical homes. So again, lots of resources, at my fingertips. I knew I was going to have lessons to be learned, and I knew there were going to be some folks that we weren't going to be able to find. And of course, always in this type of research, there's going to be emotional times. So this is a clip basically from the Descendants website showing you a piece of the wall where you can see names. You see Gillette, you also see occupations. And also what's on here is a lot of unknowns because, as you know, in slave era research, sometimes the enslaved individuals have first names only, and the research that the university had done also revealed in some of the transactions that the enslaved laborers were not named. So the memorial also honors the ones that are not named, but they know they were there. So I had to make sure I have a basic understanding of African American research. And I say this to all of us. It doesn't matter that I'm African American. Doing this type of research, switching into this era, into the 19th century, will also bring other things with it, like challenges. I know slavery was about economics. I know people were property. But there was buying, selling, and of course, renting. I know there's going to be times I might encounter people that were sold and possibly sold deep south, as they coined the phrase, and they're gone. We might not know of them forever. And DNA might be the only opportunity for someone to find ancestor that might have been sold south. I knew free people of color were going to be involved. And of course, I watched for the military. There's no magic. Those of you that listened to me the other day, Wednesday, for the Virginia Genealogical Society, this is a message I just want to make sure we all understand. In any genealogical research, there's no magic. This is about deep diving, digging in these roots and trying to connect the dots. So research is all about time, place, and asking questions. And this is how I frame it, you know, for a context. So those are some of my basics. I want to know a time. What's the era I'm working in? And the locations. You know, people move from county to county. County names during certain times might have changed. And again, it's all about asking questions. So one of the things that I live by, and especially in this research, probably more than my own personal, is that I have to go local. And what I mean by that, of course, we're talking about the historical societies, but think of the 4 C's I have listed here. There needs to be contact with courthouses, cemeteries, churches, and the communities that are within the counties or the cities that you're researching. If you ever get a chance to be able to walk the grounds of your ancestors, it's an experience. Typical challenges that I relay all the time, going to come across records that are not recorded, some are destroyed. I could be in contact, or any of us could be in contact with people and families that know the information. They can deny the information. It's in the past, leave it alone. And some that are just not going to share the information. And you know what? It's kind of okay. Have to live with that. Some of the challenge we face is because us as researchers, and we could be called the genealogist, we could be called the family historian, whatever title you choose to take on. But sometimes we're not doing a thorough enough research, or we're not asking enough questions, or if we're dealing with interviews and things, we don't know when to hush up and let the people just talk. And those of you that have interviewed, especially elderly people, you know, you got to come with less questions and let them relay their experiences and their history and things like that for you to be able to get leads. And of course, despite COVID, a lot of people just rely on the online research. That's going to create some challenges. And again, you want to make sure that you understand the local aspect and what's there. Ages and dates, we knew that was going to create a challenge. They're going to change. Census to census, people's ages could change. Also, some of the information that we get from oral history might not be reliable, or it's questionable. Doesn't mean that somebody didn't tell great grandma something that wasn't true. Or over the generations, it gets added flavor and it actually changes. But again, we take the opportunity to think of oral history that's come down through generations of a family. I look at them more as wonderful stories, but also leads and hints excuse me, of where I'm supposed to go. So sometimes people in the early 1800s, and you'll see this in the slides that I share, they don't make it to the 1860s for me to be able to pick up, you know, other resources and use a different record set. And the spellings of names just don't count. Don't rely if it's not exactly the way you know of it or the way it sounds or how people, you know, repeat information. Analysis, again, just not deep enough. I want folks to basically stay in the box and not jump out and go down rabbit holes. Stay in there, dive deeper. I mentioned the emotional aspects already. And then again, for me, a challenge. I've been here since 2003 in the Central Virginia area. There's so much I still don't know about the area and the families. I am learning all the time. And I have to credit all my genealogy buddies because their questions or even their sharing of their information helps me expand my knowledge of this area. And the biggest challenge for us, all of us, is taking our 21st century thinking and going back into even the 20th or the 19th or 18th century and either judging or trying to make sense of it because of what we've grown up and been exposed to and had experiences with doing genealogy. There's not a glimmer of any of what we have access to that somebody back in that 18th, 19th or 18th century would have even thought of. So this is typical for me. You'll hear it every time I do a presentation is basics. Follow the money, the land, the water, the community, and the faith of the people. This was critical for me to keep this foundation for working within Central Virginia. I had to have a foundation to say, let me just keep doing this, you know, and keep following the money. Who's owning land, who's not owning land, and so on. So are you guys able to see where I have a waiting room thing that's popped up? Is that showing up on the slide there? Because I don't know if it's blocking anything, but I see it and just didn't know if folks in the...
What is it you're looking for, Shelley?
No, it's telling me when somebody comes into the waiting room.
Oh, no, we don't see that.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I received a list in July 2019. So you're getting a glimpse of the list that I'm dealing with. And again, there's over 2,000 entries. There's a time frame on there, 1817 to 1867. Now, as you can see on here, some of them have slave owners' name, like Edbert Watson, and we'll talk about him in a few minutes. So I got a slaveholder's name. I have an enslaved person and possibly a free person. And their status is there as enslaved. And then again, it says slave hire, but it could also have the occupation or what service those enslaved individuals were doing for the university. These records and this information spreadsheet comes from, I believe, graduate students that were researching the financial ledgers for the university. And basically anywhere that they saw that there was a transaction for, you know, labor, and especially labor that tied with the term hands or slaves, you know, and they created this list. So it's as much information as I have. So I work from this list. And you can see where some of the enslaved, which after the date, this first column would be the slave holder. This would be the enslaved individual's name. Some of them are first name only. And some of them are going to have surnames. And again, here's your unknown. So again, I pay homage to those that are unknown because they are just as important as the ones that we have a name, even if it's first name only. Anytime we do any type of research, not just African American, any genealogical research, goodness, you got to have a map. And so basically, these are the counties that I focus on because they're within reach of the university. A lot of Thomas Jefferson's friends are close. And so there's a lot of interactions and connections amongst these counties. So if I find a family in Louisa County, they're going to also probably have connections to the other counties that are around them, like Fluvanna, Albemarle, and Orange. So tapping into one family also explodes into maybe 4 or 5 more families. And so what I set up was thinking, okay, how do I find people? How am I going to look for descendants of these enslaved laborers? Well, one, got my map. Another thing is I created an intake form, and the Descendant group helped and put it up on Google, Google Docs, so I can send this link out, and people could fill that out. I can scan through the information that they provided and see if any of the surnames show up on the list that I have. How was I getting the word out to tell people about it? Facebook. I went right to social media, and I used Twitter, as well as you can see the Facebook page. And it is Finding the Enslaved Laborers at UVA. So following on that, you can keep up with anybody that I'm researching regarding enslaved laborers. And again, you can see that post that I did December 30th talking about Nelson Price, and I'm going to walk through that in a moment. And so again, Facebook, seeking_UVA is on Twitter. So any stories that come up. And remember, if you're doing African-American research, once you cross into the 19th century and there's slaves involved or slave era, you're going to have to also research the white families. Okay, that's just critical. Got to do it together any way that we can. Twitter has been good because I'm also seeking the white families and I'm getting positive responses. I could put out a surname and ask, and I'm asking the white families because there's some fear with sharing information, but I'm asking how best can we communicate and discuss, the families that were enslaved on their ancestors' plantations. Some of them are researching and are just learning somewhat that they're family enslaved individuals, and where the African American families will have an assumption that our ancestors, a lot of them were enslaved. Here's a snapshot of the intake form. Excuse me. And so again, my goal and the plan that I had was, okay, I need to have information come in to me. I want them to be able to find me. And again, I can't do this by myself because I'll need those descendants to either hear their family's name or that I'm focusing on the county where their ancestors were at, just like Louisa County. So we send out the link. This is the information. I'm getting their contact information. And some of the descendants are probably in the chat room now, or that we're working on trying to see if they connect, if they're lines. Because I can't always assume just because they got the same name that might be on my list that there's an actual connection. Because as you know, people that were enslaved had the opportunity, and I like to say choice. Once they became free, they could take any name they wanted. And so again, my first thought was I got to build some trees. I got to figure out a system. I'm well over 100 trees, and you'll see a little pic of that. And I'm close to working with 100 plus people. And we've got 40 plus descendants right now that we've been able to document. Here's a snapshot of my Ancestry page. You can see there's 7 pages of the trees. My own personal family, there's about 10 trees. And I believe each page is about 25. And then I got trees that are shared with me, which I have probably about 30 trees that 3 pages. So it's more than 30. 3 pages of trees that are shared with me. So we both can be working on the same thing. So I got to find records and resources. Again, when I moved here, I am close to the areas where my own family research is at. I belong to these local genealogy groups in the societies. And so I'm familiar with a lot of names. Jean Cooper's book, who she's also local and worked at the University of Virginia, her book was a good reference. And these records are online and unlocked at the time, as far as the index to these records to the antebellum Southern plantations. So I look to the local resources in helping me further my research. And I don't go far from the genealogy groups or looking at the histories on these plantations and what they have done with the enslaved laborers, the list, like Monticello has the Getting Word Project. And this has been going on, I think, since the late 1980s. And when they established that program at Monticello, looking for descendants of the enslaved laborers that Thomas Jefferson had at Monticello. And again, Google's my friend. We should, definitely as researchers be able to think of Google right in our strategies. So here's some of my resources that I use all the time, and, different books, different indexes. And I think Leslie's here. Thank you always for the Virginia Slave Birth Index. And you can see that time frame of 1853 to 1865. These books, the whole set, I purchased. They're at the historical societies. And but once COVID hit, I wasn't running into the historical society to use the books. So I ended up buying them, and they are sitting right here to the left of me, along with other resources. And again, seeing different documents, you see my handwritten notes tracking out a family with my cookies. My coffee's always not too far, and I'm not shy from the wine either when I'm trying to do research. I also had to understand about the rental system. And I've been researching a lot of my own family, but I hadn't found that anybody had been rented. So let's start this off to know that these enslaved laborers were rented to the university. So the slave owners did contracts basically. And so there's this book called Slaves for Hire up on the left-hand corner, helped me to understand that about this system. And again, we know it's about money, definitely. We know it's money. And so being able to understand how this network or system was working was critical for me to find, other people that had researched this whole venue. And again, I want to know what collections were out there. And I'll talk about the Friedman Bureau records as well. So there's records and resources that might not be available when we're doing this African-American research. And again, I'm walking through my process because looking at this collection or my spreadsheet was a little bit different than looking at my families and researching, or even for the clients that I had. It was just a different form. It's like, okay, I'm now looking in the 18th century. Because remember, my list started in 1817. And so where are the records? Looking a little differently. So sometimes your vital statistic records, birth, death, and marriage, are not going to be in the same place that we think of that we go look for it now. There's not going to be a list. There's not going to be the health department back in 1818 or 1820 where I'm going to go download a database or go through Family Search or Ancestry, my heritage or whatever resources are out there, or even the Library of Virginia. That stuff is going to come, and remember, enslaved individuals were property. So I got to find the property records and the probates and the wills and things. There might be a list, you know, and again, it's different from then and where I would look locally. And that's why it's so critical to know what the holdings are in these historical societies. And don't forget your public libraries, your universities, and their special collections. Okay, were there newspapers back then? I might not see an obit about the enslaved person that died. I'm not going to see a funeral notice. So I had to adjust from what I was doing and put myself into a different time era. Were there military records? Well, yes, there are military records, but you had to understand the war. Am I looking at revolutionary time? Possibly. If somebody is an enslaved laborer in 1820 or 1815, there's chances they were born back during that time, right after the revolution or before. And of course, cemeteries and headstones are critical. In the Charlottesville area, we have a group that is called the Preservers of the Daughters of Zion Cemetery, right downtown Charlottesville. And they're still finding unmarked graves. And so there's a couple friends of mine, genealogists and researchers, that they have ancestors that are buried in the cemetery. And so they've been taken on the past several years of preserving that and bringing out the names. That list is right here by me and it gets updated. They have a Facebook page as well. But a lot of these enslaved laborers and their descendants are possibly buried or are buried in that cemetery. Another opportunity at the local level for me and anyone else to make sure that you're connected with what's going on. And of course, here's some other records that will link to African Americans. They're not just called African American records, so don't mistake what I'm saying here. But what I'm saying where African Americans could be recorded or listed. We've got census bureaus. Once they're either free or they're enslaved. If they're enslaved, you're not going to see them except on the slave schedule. Pension records, yes, there could be people that got pension records excuse me, from the Civil War or Revolutionary War. You got Bibles, letters, property records. There could be oral history that gives us leads. Of course, wills, bill of sales, obits, and things like that. And what was really interesting, working with one of the prospective descendants, and she's also with the leadership group, one of the things we were looking at was two names in Albemarle County, possibly linking to Orange. So if I get to Orange, I'm going to link to Louisa. But, you know, one of her ancestors was owned or purchased by James Barber, who becomes a governor. And this is coming out of Orange County. And so Barber is one surname. And what they found at the collections at UVA was basically the bill of sale for James Barber purchasing Priscilla. Priscilla was born in Gloucester County. She was 12 years old. And then she comes in with him as his property into Orange County. So again, looking at that, and I talk about the emotional times, it takes you back a bit. You're thinking a 12-year-old. My daughter's 43 right now. I couldn't imagine that happening to her at 12 years old. I also look for references in books and dissertations. There could be studies. And of course, I talk about the house repository, which is everything that's at somebody that you're related to or in contact with. What do they have at home or what do they know? And of course, the famous 1870 census. So that's important as well. This is the blank sheet for the 1870. Why is this important? It's a federal document, number one. It's the first time formerly enslaved folks have names, and their names are on this federal document or in a census. So there's a lot of questions, and it kind of looks, I apologize for that because it looks a little blurry on my end. But you can download these blank forms, which is a good method of practice to do, is whenever you're dealing with the census, have the blank right there. So you're understanding each of the columns that's there, because there could be a hint there that helps you go back a little further when this ancestor was enslaved. And so again, I'm repeatedly going back and forth through the 1870 census. But the biggest resource for me helping me through this is the Friedman Bureau. And a lot of you were at Friedman Bureau Friday last night. So I go through this every Friday because this is one of my favorite record sets. And it's from 1865 to 1872. This is a mapping site. A couple of my friends and our genealogy buddies out there developed this site. And so you have the map, and where you're looking at is a picture here on the left is all of the places that they marked on the map in the southern states where the field offices were at. The field offices were the place that the formerly enslaved were able to go to get assistance. And I'll show you a couple pieces of assistance in documents that you can see. This is that deep dive. If you're going to cross in to once a person was enslaved and now becomes free, this is a record set. Now, the correct name for the collection is the Bureau of Refugees, Friedman, and Abandoned Lands. Those refugees, remember, this is federal. So it's an inclusive document that whites are in here as well. And I want to make sure that whites realize that they're in this record set, because if not, right after the Civil War, they should have a gap if they're not dealing with these record sets to see where their ancestors were at, number one, if they received services. They also marked the Friedman Bureau hospitals, the Freedmen's Bank, which is totally separate from the Friedman Bureau records, and the U.S. Colored Troop battle sites, and also the slaves and freedmen of the Indian Territory. And we're hoping for more things that we've talked about on our Freedman Friday to get them to map. So looking at Louisa Courthouse Field Office, I opened up and expanded the map from that site. So you can see right where the arrow is at, there's Louisa Courthouse, and that's what it is called. So again, the enslaved, the Freedman Bureau field offices are oversawn or, managed by the military. And so that word is getting out to the enslaved that now that they're free, they need to be able to go, or maybe they're escorted, from plantations to these offices to receive services. Now, what's key about this, looking at this map, is I also see where the other field offices are within the Louisa Courthouse. So just because they might have been enslaved in Louisa doesn't mean that they didn't go to Orange, or Fluvanna offices or any of these other, because some people might have went where they know family were at that might have gotten sold. And again, start with where, and this is where I do, is start where I know they were living at. And it could have been because I found them not on my list of the enslaved laborers, but because I went to the 1870 census and they had a surname. So once you click on Louisa, it pops up a box and it's telling you what the microfilm is at the National Archives. And this one for the county is M1913. And then it's telling me how many rows are there. Okay. Once I open that up, I'm taken in to the field offices and where they're located. And you can see where I see the courthouse down there by the arrow. Now, if your county is not showing up, make sure you're looking for the city or the county seat. And also you could look at who's ever in the area, and maybe the records are jointly with another field office. And so you really need to know what's around wherever you're researching. So I opened up. Now I'm looking at the courthouse records for Louisa. And remember, it told me that there were 2 rolls, and roll 103 and roll 104. And then it's giving you what's in this record set and what you're going to see. And I'll show you something from roll 104, a marriage record, because there was an act of February 27th, 1866 that previously enslaved people could now marry, and so forth. There's letters, there's orders, there's contracts. So this is what it looks like for Louisa County Courthouse. Okay, let's go in another step further. Here's an example of the Friedman Bureau marriage records for the county, and it's dated 1866. So what you can see over here is the name, right? The age, whoops, go back, cursor. Okay, the name, the age, the wife's name, her age, the occupation, this line is farming, and then of course the location. And I'll highlight Nelson Price on here. But look at the other surnames. That doesn't mean that they're the enslaved laborers, but this is what's happening in that area. These are the people that are going to that field office basically and saying, this is my wife and these are my kids. Note also, look at Ben. It looks like Ben Henry, 45, and his wife, and I really can't get her name. Looks like Judy is 40. Ben had a former wife. Her name was Sarah. And of course, they had one child, Tyler, and Tyler Washington. That's what I think that says. And they're living. And it also is telling you that the wife Judy had a former husband, and she also had children. And it says had by something 2 children, and both are living. And look, there's their names. This is why I love this record set so much. It is such a gold mine. So people that have ancestry here in Louisa, look at what you can do. And a matter of fact, a few years ago, and if you listen to the talk that Elaine Taylor and I did a few weeks ago, we're looking at the record set. There was a transcribing thing going on. And you go to Louisa's County Historical Society's page, and you can go through and it'll link you to the Piedmont site where you see a lot of the, I'm going to say databases or these spreadsheets of listing things and resources. So I'd ask that if, Carlene could put the link to your YouTube channel in the channel to the chat room so they can go look at the talk that Elaine and I did on January 23rd. Again, you want to know what other resources are there. And again, I look at this and sometimes it's emotional to be able to see this. And I'm back in 1866. Here's a sample labor contract. And it's a William Perkins and family. Last night at our Friedman Bureau Fridays, we talked about the Perkins family. But I also know there's Perkins in the neighboring counties. And this is William Perkins and family. And of the first part, of Benjamin Francisco of the second part. And again, here's the Perkins family household with the wife Sally and then the children. So there's a labor contract being done at the Friedman Bureau field office. And it's basically saying this is how long the contract is, this is how much money it is, and there could be terms and conditions to what they will receive. And it could include housing and food, or maybe it's a sharecropping type thing that I've been seeing also, that some of the things that they grow as farmers and they have to share with, I'm going to say possibly the former slave owner, or it could be whoever hired them and it's not the former slave owner. But the research could help do that. Taking this labor contract, looking at the surnames, pinning down where the Perkins were at and also the Franciscos, and deep diving back in to see if that was the former slave owner. Sometimes it could say it. Here's a field office, and look at the title of this, and it says U.S. You're not going to find it just under Friedman. See, it says U.S. Friedman Bureau Records. This is the the Assistant Commissioner Records, but it starts at 1863 to 1878. So I did a drop down and looking at the claimant list. I also looked at census returns. There's only a select few of census returns. But if you don't go in, because these are not indexed, if you don't go into this drop down, you don't know if any of the resources or your location that you're researching is in there. I know on the census return, Mecklenburg is one of the counties, and Roanoke, and I can't think of the other one, Montgomery County, which is where Blacksburg is at, and Virginia Tech. So anyway, but look at the list. Those are the type records that are within the Friedman Bureau. And there is a pre-bureau, which is only going to be pretty much in Mississippi, that 1863. I have not seen any pre-bureau records per se in the research that I'm doing in the locations. Okay, so here's a few of the surnames. And I'm going to say not off the top of my head, but those are the ones that I'm actively, not the Hesco or Harrison, but everybody above from Price to John S. May. But what's significant, like I put Sandridge, Harwich, and Poindexter on one line, those three connect to Boxley and also Dickinson. There's more Louisa County names. I'm just highlighting these for folks that are listening, that if you connect to any of these, I'm actively looking through these families. I actually started John S. May this morning, and amazing. His wife is a Poindexter. So another connection within the county. So again, I'm looking to walk through and find Nelson Price's descendants. So remember, I showed you my list, and in 1863, we've got December, Edbert R. Watson enslaved Nelson Price and rented Nelson Price to UVA. Now, UVA did not allow the students to bring their slaves. The professors were able to bring their slaves. And so the rest of the rental market would have came from the neighboring, plantations and also counties. And again, friends of Thomas Jefferson. So you see the entry on my spreadsheet for 1863, but I also have another entry in 1864 in August, where Edbert is also got a Joshua Smith. Okay, so this is my cue to say, okay, what am I thinking about here? I've got a person with a surname. So I had to come up with my thoughts and questions about Nelson Price, because not everybody's going to have a last name. So where did it come from? Was it a former owner? And again, this is me thinking out, got that piece of paper, the coffee, whatever, and I start writing out my notes. He was enslaved in Albemarle County because that's where Edbert Watson was. I had to go build a tree on the slave owner, Edbert R. Watson. I think the middle name is Reed Watson, and also I had to set up a tree for Nelson. Because again, I got a time and wasn't quite sure about location until I set up Edbert Watson's tree. And so Nelson is enslaved by him in Albemarle. And my wish was, okay, let's hope he makes it to 1870. And think about it. I'm going to say that for anyone I'm looking at, because some of these are 1820s and 30s and whatever. Did they make it through the Civil War? We don't know until I get in there. Also, did he have a wife? Did he have children? I got to check the Friedman Bureau record to see if a Nelson Price shows up anytime after the Civil War, and basically before I get to 1870 as well. So, and again, not sure of his age because my list doesn't give me location and it doesn't give me age. I take a premise in this research that everybody's at least 25 years old to have some starting point. So I did go right on to the 1870 census. I find Nelson Price, and you can see him, and then the folks in the household, and you'll see names on the next slide coming up. And again, he's a farm laborer, and then had wife and kids. And again, we're talking about 1870, but he's in Louisa. He's not in Albemarle. So, of course, there was times that I had to spend in Albemarle because that's where the slaveholder was at. Okay, let's go through. So this is what it looks like, you know, on Ancestry. You have the view of the record, and then you can look at the actual document there, you know, the census sheet. Always look at the census sheet because remember, information is indexed and there can be, you know, things that are seen differently, wrong, incorrect, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to thank everybody that does indexing or transcribing, even though some of the things are inaccurate. It's okay. I love the point that people are volunteering their time. So I'm showing you the inferred children. And of course, under the household members, there's also a George Robinson in there, and he's 21, and he's just listed as a laborer. But I want to know what the connection is to the Robinson family, to the Price family. Okay. Another thing, when you're evaluating, you're looking at how are these connections? Who are they connecting to? And it's also given me the location of where Nelson is at in 1870. So I set up the tree. I'm wondering, that surname, where did it come from? Well, look at Edbert Reed Watson Sr. There's his wife. You see the kids, and he has another wife. Well, look at mama. Edbert's mama is a Price. So what does that tell me looking at this? Okay, he probably Nelson came from Jane. How did Jane get Nelson? Or even did Jane own Nelson? Don't know. But I know Richard Price because he's on my list. And he was a large slaveholder. And of course, we're dealing in Louisa County. But Watson is in Albemarle. So now I got a trail here. I got Watson, you know, basically in Albemarle renting Nelson. But when Nelson becomes free, he's in Louisa County. And then I'm seeing where he might have picked up that last name. So I'm building trees. I'm on Ancestry. I'm also looking at any other public trees that has these same names, you know, or maybe it's on Richard Price or Egbert. But also a big clue for folks when you're doing this type of research, even for your family, also look at those ladies' maiden names. And you're going to, these wives, you're going to hear me repeat that. So I started a tree also on Nelson. And of course, I only could get Nelson and use the 1870 census, right? Because I hadn't went to the Friedman Bureau record to see if he's there yet. And so there was a document that even gave his parents' name, Nick Price and Mary. But again, I've got a wife, Martha Perkins, another surname that connects here, their children, and then also America Clark, which on the marriage record that I showed you from the Friedman Bureau, remember the wife of Nelson Perkins was America. Didn't have her surname, but her name was America. And I was able to pick up that on one of the children who had died, or it was a marriage record that listed her maiden name. So you can see how I'm looking at the white slave owner, and now I'm looking at the formerly enslaved person. Okay, so Nelson, just to get through here, Nelson, of course, I'm going to have to go through each of the children to make a connection because my ultimate goal is to find the descendant. So going down the children, I get to his son, Joel. He's born in 1889 and dies in 1961. So, you know, I'm happy about the 1961 because possibility of any of his descendants to be alive, they're still there. Okay. And so again, there's a wife of Joel, one of Nelson's sons, and you can see it on the tree. And I'm also, again, got Martha there. And I see that there is a child, Gussie. There's also this Laura Smith, another surname, but also look under Martha. Her mother is a Hunter, another way to connect to a descendant. So make sure again that you're going to follow the maiden names of these females. So I'm coming down to Joe. He's got a daughter named Gussie. I am going through each of the children and building out these trees. I can't show all of it to you, but Gussie, who dies, and I'm looking at her. So I find her being born in 1904, but she dies in 1982. And it tells me, of course, her mother's name and her children's name. So I'm coming forth, right? So it looks like she had two daughters. Okay. Got Harriet, which I could also find her as Lucille. And it looks like she was married because her surname is Baker. And again, this is on Find a Grave where I found Miss Gussie Price. And then you got Margaret, and her last name is Price. So she had not married yet. So of course I'm building out off of Gussie, and you can see over to the right down at the bottom where you see the daughter Harriet. So it matched up with what was on Find a Grave. And of course, Margaret, who also goes by Peggy. So if you look at this, bingo, I'm finding people, I'm researching the kids, and I'm building out. So if you look from Nick Price to Nelson Price to Joel to Gussie, and I get to Margaret. So I am going through death certificates, obits, marriage records, anything I can find, even simple Google searches. And again, watch for the maiden names of the women. So we know we're dealing with Perkins. We got Hurd in here also, and there's 3 different spellings. Also, of course, remember I called out about Hunter, and remember one of the daughters married a baker, and then you got Mosley's down here also. Where are all these people? Okay, I'm on the line of a descendant of Nelson. And of course, I find him. So now I'm going to talk, and the descendants. We had a 2.5-hour Zoom call with these descendants of Gussie. And so think about this. I am researching Nelson's family in Louisa County. Okay, one of those sons that he had went to Allegheny, Pennsylvania. So I'm following that son's line. And this is where I find where there were deaths more in current time. And I'm going to say more in the 20th century. So I said, okay, I'm getting close. And so following through that, in one of the obituaries listed a Price living, you know, at the time of the record that they would still be alive, possibly. So I followed that. And then again, went to Ancestry, happened to be public trees out there, and the trees of a descendant that I located of Gussie had a tree up. Her husband and her both do research on the family. I sent a message through Ancestry to contact them and, you know, who I was, what I was doing. And they didn't know about Nelson, but it was her second great grandfather. So we were all happy and going through there. And I will call out Black Pro Gen because the husband said, I know you because you're on that panel at Black Pro Gen. So that's telling me that they've been researching also, because if you're following any of the Black Pro Gen, they've been around for about 5 or 6 years now. And there's a lot of episodes on various topics over these last 5 years. And again, he was familiar with that. So that was good for me. So let's move on to Palacin Boxley. He's on my list. You can see the information. And I'm going to take a drink of water here and let you guys glance through so you can see the information that I'm looking at, trying to think, I'll say, Okay, so the other entry you don't see, it just says that Palacin Boxley rented four Negro men, then 2 boys, and then a woman. And then scrolling through my list, now I got names of the enslaved. And you can see I got a date. It doesn't give me a location, but of course I had to build a tree on Palacin, right? And there's other names that are connected. There's Raglan, J.C. Raglan. That's another surname, but he's a witness, but he's also renting, and he's also a slaveholder. And I know there might be some Raglins here. Then you see the other entry where Jackson is showing up in March, where Palacin just rented him. So of course I go to the slave schedule, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to find out about, Palacin. What's going on with him? Ultimate goal is to find descendants or relatives. And he's got 29 enslaved individuals at the 1850 slave schedule. So remember, you got the 1850 and you got the 1860 slave schedules. The people that were enslaved are only going to be identified by age and gender. And of course, their race is going to be a B. Sometimes you'll see the M, because down here under the Perkins, and note, we said Perkins, and they're on the same sheet as Boxley, Palacin. Here's a Jesse Perkins down here, and there's some M's. So that's going to indicate mulatto, okay? So setting up a tree, right, for Palacin, just like I did for Edbert Watson. I got a wife, got the surname Dickinson. Remember, I listed on some of the surnames searching, the other names that connected this family, which means there's all the children that are down there. And I'm also looking at Spiller. Spillers are in Albemarle. Dickinsons are also in Albemarle. And again, my goal was not to go to the Dickinson yet. My goal was to follow the Boxleys. And then, of course, Shepherd turns up at Dorothy Shepherd, which way back, is George Boxley. I'm looking, no matter how far I have to go back to be able to come back forward, okay? Because of naming patterns also. So, finding the descendants. Well, Palacin's first cousin, this is all happening in Louisa, is Thomas Boxley. They're in Louisa County. I know Thomas Boxley because I was contacted, that, as the last bullet shows, that Descendant basically found me, of Alan Boxley. Now, Alan is not on my list. Palacin is. Thomas Boxley is Palacin's first cousin. And Thomas, well, wait a minute. Thomas is the slaveholder, and he has a son with one of his slaves, and his name is Alan. So the descendant is coming down to Alan, and they're still related. I know Thomas leaves out of Louisa, I think it's 1835, and goes to Halifax, Virginia, and then on to Tennessee. And if I have that the reverse, I'm sure I'm going to be corrected by the descendant, because I get it confused all the time. So again, I'm watching the pattern of where these Boxleys are. And so far, all the research that me and the descendant that's doing, and she's noted as Miss Fletcher there, all of the Boxley slaves took the surname Boxley. And we are finding this in the various marriage records, registries, census, the slaveholder wills, they're calling them out, and they have the last name of Boxley. In one sense, I don't want to say it's easy, but that helped a lot to be able to track this line. So again, through social media, genealogy groups and things, they actually found me, and we still work together on researching the Boxley line. And again, because Palacin and all of them are still here in Louisa County and descendants. And there's more history about the Boxleys in Louisa County. So think about how I found that, or they found me, and it continues. So want to bring this all together. We know America, and this is a slide that's on all my talks if I'm talking anything about African Americans and enslaved individuals. We know the country is not at peace with slavery. We got the emotional times, but again, it's also some empowering times, because when I'm finding that have the enslaved labor, and then I find their family, and the pleasure of being able to share that information if they didn't know, or even if they did know, then, you know, we're confirming what their oral history might have said, what the evidence as in records might have said. It's empowering because they survived this horrible system, you know, really all about money. And so African American research in Louisa County or any county, it's going to take a little bit more time. I'm pleading with people to tell the stories, do the research, and just stick to those basics. I talked about time, I talked about place, and asking questions, following the money, the land, the water, and the faith of the people within that community, and realize that we're going to have brick walls and challenges, and that's okay. You just embrace them, you know, expect them to be there, and just think in your mind that it's going to make you a better researcher. I'm not asking for brick walls, but it definitely helps to strategize and work those out and just keep asking questions. And the quote by Sir Winston Churchill over here, it says, "A nation that forgets its past has no future." So again, I like to thank the historical societies, Albemarle, Charlottesville, and Louisa, and along with UVA for taking on this project and, you know, being able to have this research done. Right now, with the Descendant group, we're reaching out, looking for more people to contact either of us and see if we're connecting with any of their, you know, enslaved ancestors and see if they were laborers. So again, I thank you. And Carlene, I'm open to taking some questions if we have any.
Yeah, before we start jumping into questions, I just wanted to mention a few things in case we lose some people during the Q&A. First off, thank you, Shelley, for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure we will have some questions. I wanted to thank the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society for partnering with us on this presentation. And also I want to highlight the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation and the Phyllis Elaine Robinson Kemp Fund, which is a memorial fund that was set up at our historical society by her family. These two funds allow us to continue to do a lot of really great African-American history projects. And on that note, next Saturday, if you're not already signed up for it, we have another virtual program where myself and Marilyn Campbell, our grant program manager, will be talking about 3 African-American history projects we're currently working on. One on the integration of our local high school, oral histories, and one on getting local Black history into local classrooms. And that presentation is all about how community members can help, both remotely and in person. So if you haven't already, please do sign up for that program. I will put a link in the chat box while Shelley answers any questions.
Okay. I know there's got to be at least one. Looks like, well, I'm looking now in the chat room. So Jareen, that list came from UVA. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the talk or not, but what happened, the university had some graduate students basically create my list for me and stuff. Not for me, but they created a list and they went through the financial records. So that's a UVA list, not my personal list. Those graduate students went through the financial ledgers, and anywhere they saw service or where money was being paid for labor and it had, you know, hands or slaves, you know, and names, that's where that was created from.
And thank you, Shelley. Ignore my other question. You answered both of my questions as you continued on. So.
Oh, well, did you get the answer about the census return?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. So remember on the drop-down list in the title on the Friedman Bureau, is not like when I pulled up the Virginia Friedman Bureau and we saw all the different counties where the field offices were at, because that's indexed. But this other part now says U.S. records of the field office, that's the subcommissioner files. They're not indexed. And you can drop down, and if I would, and I should have put the slide in, if I would have clicked on the census return, it would have took me to 1865 and 1866, and then like unknown or unnamed, I think was the third box. What a census return was is a report that went back. In Mecklenburg County and Montgomery County are two that I remember. Louisa's not in there, or any of the ones that I researched from that map. They're not in there. But Mecklenburg is there, and I actually shared it with one of the Mecklenburg researchers that I know that hangs out with us on Friday. And the census return is just like a regular census, but it's the statistics and like a summary that's being reported back. And it's got names and this, that, and other that are there. So for that location, it's a gold mine. One of the things I didn't mention about one of the records, they did, Friedman Bureau records had transportation records. They had the labor contracts. They also had ration records. This is where people came there to get rations, as in food or supplies. And what's interesting, some of the ration records have name and age of the formerly enslaved, or they can call it destitute, white folks or black. And they have the list with their name and their age and the former slaveholder if they were enslaved. To me, that just brightens my day to be able to go one more level back, that they're giving me the former slave owner. And some of the records will show that are specific, and they also show where they lived before the Civil War, so name, possibly age, where they lived before the Civil War, and of course the record will reflect what county and Friedman Bureau field office they were at. So it could be a different county. And one of the nights, and I don't know if Robin Jones is on, we were going through the records, and I found one for a hospital in Richmond, which ends up being the Central State Hospital institution that a lot of research is done by King Davis. And they just had something within the last 6 months or so in the newspaper about Central State. And they had names, and it says where they were at before they went into the hospital. And so again, please take advantage of these records in the Slave Birth Index, you know, if you're researching this era, and make sure you're researching the white family right along with, if you have the former slave owner family. And let me see, was there any other ones? Elizabeth, let me see. What was the most interesting thing that you found while researching Louisa County? What is something you think viewers should know? You know what the biggest thing is, especially Louisa, if you were here when I showed the slides, the slide with some of the surnames that I'm researching, all the connections. And if I'm looking, like I saw the Price family, maybe his wife was a Washington, or coming down, and who they married on. And again, it's the system of slavery and the community aspect that everybody is connecting. And it could be by marriages. The biggest thing was the connection from county to county to county. And like Nelson Price, he's enslaved in Albemarle. Again, I come with 30 plus years of research. I might have stayed in Albemarle and never found Nelson, unless I found a marriage record for one of the kids and something indicated Louisa, you know, for me to jump out of Albemarle. But I think it's the connections of these individuals in these families within the county. And I'd like to say this is community research, you know, because they're all connecting. And let me see. Rosalind, you know, we're going to address that on Friday. He was there for 21. He aged 21. And we need to find out definitely is that a connection. And another thing for Louisa, Albemarle, Fluvanna is to note that in the 1890s, I think it was, there was a migration of a couple hundred folks, African Americans, going up to Buxton, Iowa, or Mucha-Kintock, and Roslyn is from up in that area, because there was a coal mining strike going on. So you have families that were here locally, Louisa, Albemarle, Fluvanna, that went up, they were recruited for coal mining up in Iowa during a strike. So there's families still here, but then you got the links of your Iowa family up there that are still descendants and still connected. And what's happening, like in Rosalind's case, she's tracking her family from Iowa back to Louisa and Albemarle. So again, understanding these family connections, watching those surnames and things, you know, are really critical to this type of insurance. The Friedman Bureau. It was the U.S. Friedman Bureau records. This is to Pam, and it was on that slide. And if I'm correct, Karina then will put this talk up on their YouTube channel for Louisa County Historical Society. And of course, I'll get Tom Chapman for Albemarle, Charlottesville, let them put that up, because the connection of Albemarle and Fluvanna in the area, you know, we need to have it on both of the websites, you know, for people to be able to see some of the records. So you'll be able to get the exact title, and also the Mapping the Friedmans with an S Bureau Records is the site where you can get to the mapping site. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And oh, it's in the chat room. Benita put the link to the mapping site in there. And okay, so Jareen also says, my Louisa County family migrated to Clifton Forge, which is down there by Montgomery County, Jareen. So make sure you get into that census return, because Montgomery County was one of them, the counties that is in that list. And then they went on to West Virginia for mining work. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Anything else? And Mr. Wilms, I see you there. Your second great uncle was the chaplain at UVA. Any way to find any connections between him and the enslaved people in the time period? I need to just take the surnames and check my list. And there's also a Jewel website, which was on my slide, a link, which is Jewel, stands for JEUL. If someone can put that in the chat room, and that's Jefferson's Early University Life, I think it's called, and go to people on that site. So it's JUEL, then dot something else. And I actually could get it if someone doesn't get it. And, but also look at that. And that's going to cover everywhere, anything connected with Jefferson, enslaved, overseers, the white slave holders, any connections that they have. But go under people and scan through and look through there, because it will have African Americans with first name only, and also will have the ones with a surname. And of course, you're going to see the overseers, and also see others that, you know, just were slaveholders, plantations. Yeah, you got it, Carlene. That's the site. So that's an excellent site, and it's updated on a regular basis as well. And also Central Virginia History Researchers, that's another genealogy group. And go in and look at the research that's been done for years. And they highlight plantations, a couple plantations, and records and resources, and of course, surnames. And that's the big thing, is connecting these families together. Did I get them all? Courtney, the whole talk will be on the Louisa County and Albemarle, Charlottesville County YouTube channels, or their channels where they have the videos at on their sites.
And I will also email out the PowerPoint through email, since Shelley, you shared it with me, with the evaluation form. We always send out an online evaluation form after our programs. It really does help us adjust our programs and improve them.
Yeah. And the one that Elaine and I did is also on that channel. And please go to that one, because there's more specific records. Even though I use them, I can't, you know, in the craziness of how we all do our own research, there is a plethora of resources and records specific to Louisa County on the other talk as well. Yeah, and if anybody wants to contact me, Facebook is the best way. Post a question, inbox me on Facebook, and on the front slide had the email address if you think you are connected. And again, I don't know how many Louisa County people I have. I started on John S. May today, and then I saw Poindexter as his wife. That's the slaveholder. And now I went into Poindexter. But the biggest thing, coming back to the lady that asked me the most thing, was knowing that the Poindexter, the Harris, the Nunn, the Sandridge, and the Boxleys all connect. And you see, I don't want to use the word sharing. I don't know another word to do it, but you can watch the slave groups where one group had 3 or 4 people they rented, and now a family member is coming up and they're renting this. You'll see 1 or 2 of the same names that was with the group. So everybody's making money on this. You know what I mean? The labor and being able to do whatever they're doing for their own personal gain. But it's unbelievable how I watch the names, and that's why I put that whole line, because Miss Fletcher and I have been researching those other names that were enslaved by Edbert, because it looks like they're leading all into Louisa, where they were enslaved in Albemarle. So another exciting connection to say, wait a minute, let's just group over here and follow the group and see if we can find others. And we found 3 other ones, Wyatt and Jackson, and we're following Rhoda right now. That was the female. And then one of the wives of one of the slaveholders, name is Rhoda. So we're wondering where that would have came from. So again, I thank everybody for coming. I don't see any other questions.
I had raised my hand for a question. First of all, you're my shero.
Oh, thank you.
Shelley, who do you want to fill out your survey form? You know, like I haven't, like, do you want people whose ancestors are just from Louisa and Albemarle to do them? Or, you know, like, is that helpful, or does that muddy the water?
I would like anyone that knows they have connection to Central Virginia, and that was on the map. I showed all the counties: Louisa, Albemarle, Fluvanna, Buckingham, Augusta, Orange, and I don't know who else, Albemarle, that I have on that map, because they all connect, and they're connecting, number 1, from slavery, number 2, family connections as well. And so I would say anyone that feels they have, or they think they have connections to Central Virginia in those counties, because I'm going to automatically check my list. And if they're in these counties, I'm going to take a look, because I will see the surnames, I will see the maiden names, and again, looking at various ways to see if they connect to any of the people that are on my list. And it could be people that are not on the list that were enslaved and also rented to UVA. And maybe it just wasn't picked in the ledger book. And again, we're talking about back to 1817, just like we look at census and other, you know, documents. The enumerators didn't always fill out the whole census, the questions that are asked. Same thing on birth certificates and death records. I always try to find supporting evidence to support, because we find mistakes and incorrect things that are not correct on documents all the time, or you got two documents and they're conflicting in some kind of way. You want to resolve that. My ultimate goal is to connect them to up to 4,000 names that are possibly going to be on that memorial.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Shelley. I actually can't believe that we finished in time. It is 11:26 and our end time was 11:30, which is pretty impressive. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, stay well. Hope to see you again in another program.
Thank you.
Thank you.